You are eating a bowl of cold beans from a can because you haven't been to a store in 11 days. The cabin doesn't have electricity. The cabin doesn't have running water. What the cabin has is silence, and silence is the only thing left in the world you trust. Outside, the Montana wilderness stretches in every direction for miles. Lodgepole pines, frozen creek beds, a sky so dark at night it feels like a ceiling pressing down. You built this place yourself. Every board, every nail, every window frame cut by hand. It is 10 feet by 12 feet, and it is the only honest thing you have ever made. You are not a violent man. That is what you tell yourself. You are a precise man, a logical man, a man who looked at the world with a mathematician's clarity and arrived at a conclusion that most people are too afraid or too stupid to reach. Technology is not neutral. It is a system of control dressed up as convenience, and the men who build it are not innovators. They are architects of a cage. And you have decided to make the architects uncomfortable. The first package went out in 1978. A small wooden box, carefully constructed, left at a university. No one was killed. That was not the point, not yet. The point was to signal, to announce, to say someone is watching what you are building, and someone objects. The second package was more serious. The third, more serious still. Over the years, the packages traveled to universities, to airlines, to computer stores, to the offices of men whose names appeared in science journals and technology patents. Some of the recipients lost fingers. Some lost eyes. Some lost their lives. 16 devices over 17 years. 3 dead, 23 injured. The mathematics were clean. The message was consistent. The FBI called you the most elusive domestic terrorist in American history. They gave you a name. You read it in a newspaper someone left at the trailhead 4 miles from your cabin, and you felt nothing. Because names are how the system tags and catalogs the things it cannot understand. The agents working the case have almost nothing. They know the devices are handmade with a woodworker's precision. They know the bomber avoids metal components that could be magnetically detected. They know he sources materials locally, never from the same place twice, and leaves no fingerprints, no fibers, no biological trace. The profile they have built describes a white male, highly educated, with a background in hard sciences or mathematics, who has retreated from society and operates alone. The profile is accurate. That is the thing about the men hunting you. They are not stupid. They simply cannot find you because finding you would require knowing where to look. And the wilderness does not show up on any database. For 17 years, that is enough. Then you make the only mistake that matters. You write the manifesto. 35,000 words. You have been working on it for years, refining it, sharpening it, the way you sharpen your tools in the cold light of the kerosene lamp. It is not a document of madness. That is what they will call it. But that is because the people who read it will be looking for madness to explain away the argument instead of engaging with the argument itself. It is a document of diagnosis. Industrial society and the damage it does to human autonomy, to freedom, to the psychological core of what it means to live a life with dignity. You send it to the New York Times and the Washington Post with a condition. Publish it, and the killing stops. The FBI does not want them to publish. The FBI believes publication is a capitulation to terrorism. which is a concern that makes sense from the inside of a bureaucracy and no sense at all from the outside of one. The editors debate. The Attorney General makes a call. And on a September morning in 1995, the manifesto appears in print, an 8-page insert distributed to 1 million readers. You read your own words in a newspaper in a gas station parking lot 4 miles from the trailhead. You feel something then. Not pride, not satisfaction, something quieter. The sensation of having been heard, even if what they heard made them afraid. What you do not account for is a man in a suburb of Chicago who sits down on a Saturday morning with a cup of coffee and his wife's copy of the newspaper. He reads the manifesto slowly, and then he reads it again, and then he picks up the phone and calls his brother. He says, "I think I know who wrote this." His brother's name is David. Your name is his brother. The cadence of the argument, the specific turns of phrase, the philosophical framework dressed in the language of an engineer. David has read those sentences before. In letters. In the careful, controlled handwriting of a man he grew up with. A man who was once the most gifted person he had ever known. David does not call the FBI immediately. It takes months. It costs him something that will never fully grow back. But in April of 1996, he makes the call. The agents arrive in Montana quietly. They are careful because they know you are careful. They establish a perimeter and they watch the cabin for days before they move, because they want to be certain, and because a man who builds bombs in the wilderness is a man you approach with patience. On a Tuesday morning in early April, an agent knocks on your cabin door and identifies himself. You open the door. You are wearing work clothes. Your hair is long. Your beard is longer. The agent later describes your eyes as the eyes of a man who has been expecting this moment for a long time and has decided not to be surprised by it. Inside the cabin, they find enough material to reconstruct a complete picture. Bomb components in various stages of assembly. Detailed journals, meticulous, dated, clinical, documenting every device, every target, every delivery. Hundreds of pages of the manifesto in draft form, a manual typewriter, canned food stacked in careful rows, tools hung on the wall in outlines traced in pencil, so each one returns to exactly its place. The agents stand in the 10 by 12 space and nobody speaks for a moment. You are placed in handcuffs and walked to a vehicle. You do not resist. You do not speak. The trees stand perfectly still. The trial becomes a collision between your insistence on representing yourself and the court's insistence on determining your competency. You argue that accepting a diagnosis of mental illness would be a way of dismissing the argument, of reducing the critique to a symptom rather than engaging with it as a position. The court does not see it that way. Your attorneys enter a guilty plea. You are sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. You spend the rest of your life in a federal maximum security prison in Colorado. The cabin is disassembled and transported to a warehouse by the FBI, where it sits cataloged and preserved, a piece of evidence the size of a room. The men at the FBI who worked the case for 17 years receive commendations. The agent who processed the tip from your brother drives home that evening and sits in his car in the driveway for a long time before going inside. His daughter is 7. She is asleep already. He watches her breathe and thinks about the letters David wrote, the ones that described a boy who could solve graduate-level mathematics problems at 12 years old, who earned a scholarship to Harvard at 16, who fell away from the world gradually and then all at once. He thinks about the manifesto, which he has read in its entirety 3 times, which he would never say out loud, but which he cannot entirely argue with in places. He thinks about the cabin, the tools on the wall with their outlines traced in pencil. He goes inside. He does not sleep well. That is the thing about cases like this. You catch the person and you close the file, and the file does not close. It follows you home and sits in the corner of the room, and some nights you look at it, and some nights you pretend it isn't there. The wilderness in Montana doesn't know any of this. The pines stand. The creek freezes and thaws. The cabin is gone, but the clearing remains. A rectangle of pale winter light in the trees, already forgetting the shape of what stood there. This story is loosely based on the real life of Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. The manifesto, the cabin, the brother's phone call. All of it, real. If this one got in your head, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. Subscribe for more. The next story is already waiting.